Welcome to the Burisch Archive Podcasts, a series of focused discussion around the controversial claims of Dr. Dan Burisch.
Today's subject, who was the J-Rod?
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
We are diving deep into what is, I think, maybe the most profound and frankly startling claim in the entire Dan Burisch story.
It has to be.
We're talking about the identity of the entity he worked with for 20 years at S4, the one designated J-Rod. And right away, you have to throw out pretty much every conventional idea of what an alien is.
Oh, absolutely. That distinction it's the whole foundation of this.
So our mission for this deep dive is to really understand who this being was, what his purpose here was, and maybe most importantly, what his existence tells us about our own future.
A future that, according to Dan, is directly shaped by what we do right now.
You mentioned that distinction. Dan was very specific about the terminology, wasn't he?
He was. He never, ever called them aliens. They were categorized as extraterrestrial biological entities.
EBEs.
But not because they were from another planet. Exactly. That's the twist. They were EBEs because they existed outside our specific time, but fundamentally, they were extraterrestrial humans.
Future humans.
Precisely. The J-Rod Dan worked with was designated P52. That's a classification that means his genetic lineage is 100% human.
Not from.
From about 52,000 years in our future. The extraterrestrial part is purely about the time displacement. It's a temporal issue, not a galactic one.
It just makes it so much more personal. We're not talking about some creature from Alpha Centauri. We're talking about us.
Our descendants.
So let's get into his arrival. The specific J-Rod Dan knew was from the famous 1953 Kingman, Arizona crash.
That's the one. The sources are clear that this J-Rod was a survivor from that incident. The craft itself was supposedly stored out at S4 in Hangar Bay 7, kept into this enormous tarp.
And it was a retrieval vehicle, so
Yeah.
It had a destination.
It did. It was never meant to crash in the desert. The flight plan was for Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Los Alamos. Why there? I mean, what was the mission for the 3 J-Rods on that craft?
Intervention. From what Dan understood, their mission was critical. It was an information exchange.
What kind of information?
Temporal mechanics, genetics. 2 of the J-Rods were supposed to stay for a short time to work on these problems, with the 3rd piloting the craft. The crash. It was a complete mission failure.
And not just a mechanical failure. You're saying it was a temporal failure.
It was a catastrophe on a temporal level. This gets into a huge concept Dan talked about, the doctrine of the convergent timeline paradox, the DCTP.
Okay, break that down.
Well, think of it like this. Their future, the one where all these terrible errors were made.
Errors that we are making now.
Errors we're making now, exactly. That future wasn't a separate branching timeline. When they tried to travel back and the crash happened, that interruption didn't create a new reality. Instead, it basically overlaid their future reality on top of our present.
You're saying the crash literally superimposed their broken future onto our timeline.
That's the terror of it, yes. They were our future people coming back to warn us, to try to get us to change course. And the very act of them failing
Trapped us in it.
it cemented their reality as our inescapable one. It's a horrifying thought.
It is. It gives their mission this weight of desperation.
Mm.
So let's talk about the one who survived that paradox, the one Dan spent 2 decades with.
The one he knew as Chielah.
Chielah. What does that name mean?
It was his private name, and it's incredibly poignant. It comes from the word challah, which means a bread gift.
A bread gift.
Yes.
Like an offering.
Yes, a sacrifice. His mother apparently knew he was coming back as part of this exchange, so the name was intentional.
What did this future human, this gift, actually look like?
Well, physically, he was drastically different. Very small, only about 3.5 feet tall. His skin was described as a very dark, ruddy brown color, an adaptation.
And the classic gray features. The large head.
Oh, yes. A disproportionately large head for his torso, which housed that incredible intellect. And the eyes.
The big black eyes.
Huge, bulbous, and totally black. No whites at all. Dan said it gave him this absorbing, almost unsettling gaze.
And his hands.
4 fingers, very long, thin, sinuous fingers, and 4 toes as well. The 5th digit had simply been, naturally selected out over the millennia.
And he couldn't just live in our environment, could he?
No, not at all. He was kept in a special containment unit, the Clean Sphere, sometimes called the Queen's Sphere. It was highly pressurized.
Like a different atmosphere.
A different mix, yeah. A higher partial pressure of hydrogen, around 4%, and a bit less oxygen than we have. It was absolutely necessary to keep him alive.
So this being, Chielah, who came here as a sacrifice, was in pain, Dan was essentially his doctor. What was he suffering from?
It was a horribly debilitating condition. Medically, it was a paraprotein-related monoclonal gammopathy of uncertain significance type disorder, which caused a severe peripheral neuropathy.
Okay, in simple terms.
In simple terms, his body was producing an abnormal protein that was attacking and literally destroying his peripheral nervous system.
So the protein was eating his nerves away.
Exactly. And that led to terrible muscular atrophy. He was always hunched over, and his movement was this pained, difficult, Dan called it a flopping fashion.
Which is such a crucial detail.
It's vital, because that hunched, lurching walk is why some other witnesses described the J-Rod as looking reptilian, or like a praying mantis.
It wasn't his species. It was a disease.
It was a pathology, a symptom. It's one of those key nuggets that separates Dan's testimony from all the generic UFO lore out there. He wasn't some insectoid. He was a sick man.
And Dan felt that pain, didn't he? Through the sampling process.
He did, through neural entrainment. He said he could feel it every time. And yet, Chielah would willingly hold out his arm for the samples, nearly 300 of them over the years.
He knew it was important.
He knew what his purpose was. He was the gift.
And you mentioned that his health problems were maybe linked to the time travel itself, that the paradox was making him sick.
That's absolutely what Dan's claims suggest. This wasn't just some random future illness. It was potentially the physical result of the paradox, the trauma of time, the instability of the timeline manifesting as nerve decay.
So, our mistakes didn't just create a bad future for them.
Our mistakes became their biology. Their suffering was an embodied consequence of our actions right now.
So what does this all mean? How does a species, our species, diverge so dramatically? You get the small grays like Chielah, and then you have the tall Orions. How does that happen in 52,000 years?
The explanation Dan was given is a concept called phenotypic evolution or adaptive radiation.
A rapid change.
Extremely rapid, driven by a catastrophe. The sources point to a future cataclysm centered around 2012 timeline nexus that caused a profound schism in humanity. A moral one.
A split. A choice.
A choice. And based on that choice, humanity split into two branches. First, you have the J-Rods, the Greys. They were the humans who went underground to survive, or moved off-world to places like Zeta Reticuli.
And their bodies adapted to that.
They had to. They got shorter, the skin darkened, the eyes grew huge to see in low-light conditions, and their focus became, well, almost purely logical, numerological, survival-based.
And the other side of that coin, the Orions.
The Orions, or the Talls, these were the humans who took what's described as the higher moral course. They stayed above ground, rebuilt, and eventually migrated to the Orion constellation.
And they look different, too.
Very different. They're described as being a bit taller than us, blonde hair, these incredibly bright blue eyes. And their focus is more philosophical, more reflective, a stark contrast to the J-Rods.
And Chielah, being a J-Rod, had that intense intellect.
Oh, absolutely. Dan said he was beyond brilliant. He demonstrated concurrent mathematics to him using this VRML system. He talked about the rule of nines.
And that's not like the multiplication table?
No. This was a future form of math, the ability to process multiple complex streams of logic simultaneously, something way beyond what we can currently do.
Let's shift to the diplomacy of all this. Majestic. The Committee of the Majority had treaties with these beings. The T9 Treaty.
That's right. Formal agreements were in place. Dan was adamant about this. He said he was personally present at some of the T9 Treaty negotiations.
With both the J-Rods and the Orions.
Yes. And because they're from the same future, just different paths, the Orions, with their more peaceful philosophy, often acted as diplomats or mediators.
What did you say the Orions looked like up close?
He described two of their representatives. Taller than us, same basic body proportions, blonde hair. And he said they had these bright blue, almost doll-like eyes. But the really strange detail?
Go on.
They needed some kind of life support here. Dan described them as being in these devices that he could only call strollers.
Strollers? Like for a child?
That was his word for it. It suggests a serious physical fragility, or at least a major incompatibility with our environment. It just highlights how different the two branches became. The hardy J-Rods and the, perhaps, more delicate Orions.
And Dan was clear that these two groups, these future humans, weren't the only ones Majestic had agreements with.
Not at all. He was very clear that there are other completely non-human extraterrestrial species out there.
But they don't talk to us.
He said they will not deal with us directly.
Why not?
The reason he was given is blunt. We are too warlike. Our constant conflict, our political instability, it makes us an unacceptable partner. They prefer to use the Orions as brokers. as intermediaries.
What a stunning and frankly humbling thought to end on. The J-Rod, this iconic alien figure, was us, a future version of humanity sent back as a living warning, a grim reflection of the path we're on.
It completely reframes the entire phenomenon, doesn't it? It grounds it in our own responsibility. The pain Chielah felt his whole life, it may have been a direct result of ethical and scientific errors we are making today.
It really does. And it forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question. If our conflicts and our choices right now are literally shaping the physiology of our descendants, creating their future pain, what preventable steps are we ignoring today that will determine the fate of our own great-great-great-grandchildren?
Thank you for listening to the Burisch Archive Podcasts.
Check back for further detailed analysis on other aspects of Dan's claims and their extraordinary connection to our current understanding of our relationship to the extraordinary.